So welcome back to another edition of the Hands-On Business Podcast. I am delighted to say that today I am joined by Guillaume Wiatr. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
You did it.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Guillaume is a business strategy consultant, leadership coach, writer, and artist. And he teaches CEOs and founders and business owners how to build a strategic narrative. Now, anyone who's watched the Hands-On Business Podcast or even listened to it will know that normally I give a very long introduction stating all the awards, accolades, etc. But with Guillaume, since we're going to be talking about narrative, storytelling, etc., it makes sense, I would have suggested, that I hand over to Guillaume to introduce himself and give me his narrative and his story and how he came to be sitting in front of us today. Guillaume.
Hakeem, I'll try to do my best. And it's been my quest. It's been my quest for a very long time, very, very long time. I'll give you the official version to start with, and then I'll give you the detailed story of how I come to do what I do today. So today I run MetaHelm. It's a company. It's a small boutique strategy company, consulting firm based in Seattle. And when people ask me what I do, I say that I help CEOs, founders, and business executives build a strategic narrative. And what this does for them is that it helps them, it guides them to align people and accelerate the adoption of their products. And if you think about how a group, an organization work, the maximum efficiency of a group, it happens when everybody is rowing in the same direction, like looking forward to accomplish something that sometimes it's bigger than them, and that everybody kind of understand. So the work that I do is about alignment. Really, that's really to make it simple. And I discovered that this was really my passion and what I really wanted to focus on in my career about 20 years ago. This year I was a young consultant, about 27, 28, almost fresh out of college. It was at the time I was in France, so I'm French, and it was the dot-com boom, and many companies were interested in turning some of their processes into digital processes. And I was brought on by a large company because I happen to have some technical knowledge about how you digitize product from a paper form to a intangible form. And I come into this project, the very first meeting we have as a consultant, I prepare a kickoff, and the people I have in the room are the head of procurement of this big company and some engineers, some people, internal, people, and also some suppliers who are going to supply data to make this system work. This was a very high stake project. 20 million euros at the time on the line to make this work and turn all kinds of processes into digital processes. Keep in mind, today we do e-shopping and we do all kinds of stuff. We take it for granted. At the time, it was super rudimentary. It was the age stone of those processes. And 30 minutes into this meeting, I have a sense that the meeting is not going very well. I mean, it's people seem to interrupt themselves and not understand the same thing behind the same words and that kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, I can either just not say anything and just let this happen and kind of pretend, I do the consulting show, or I actually derail this because that's not what they need. They don't just need a guy to come up and just keep them going the way they go. They've been going about this project. And I stopped the meeting and I said, do you mind if we draw the project? And they look at me, kind of with googly eyes. And I hand them, letter size paper and pens. And they're kind enough to and respect my request. And they drew the project, very simple sketches, 2-3 minutes. And then we posted those sketches on the board, on the whiteboard with magnets. And everybody could tell, like, everyone had a different vision, a different understanding of what they're trying to build together. At the time for me, again, in the context, fairly young in my career, I thought this was the coolest moment I had ever, experienced, because I always kind of thought about that, about communications in companies, and this was just a powerful demonstration that you can accomplish so many impossible things when your team is aligned and working on the same narrative. And I'll go into defining what I mean really by narrative. And in the dot-com boom, you could really raise a lot of money at the time. People were investors, because I went on to start a startup after that. Investors would just ask you for like a one-page business plan. Like it was really easy to get started before the bubble burst. And I thought, yeah, money is not a problem, technical solutions is not a problem, but really when the group gets larger and you need to accelerate or pivot or shift, it's really a deal breaker then. And I thought, does this apply only to bigger companies? And so I started talking to smaller companies, and they told me, yeah, we kind of, same thing here. We kind of feel the same. And even for a one-person company where you feel like this is your course, and then you keep changing your mind, you're not very clear about, what you're shooting for, and so on. So long answer, Hakeem. This is not a new thing for me, but I just wanted to start with this story because we ended up, I say we because I don't want to come across like I was the saver for this project. I just initiated something, but we actually saved this project. We saved this venture. We saved a lot of jobs. We saved a lot of money. And I came out of this thinking, okay, this is kind of the aha moment for me. I'm going to look for solutions to replicate this, because it's like you do something and you don't know really exactly what happened. You don't know the framework or is there some underlying science behind it. You kind of come across something, you just stumble on something on accident. So fast forward 20 years later, that's what I do here in Seattle. My company, in this form has, I'm on my 6 years now, and I work with a very wide variety of companies. It ranges from the big ones. So here in Seattle, we have Microsoft that I work with. We've got Alaska Airlines that I work with, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that I work with. So big name companies who really struggle with that, and especially since COVID, when people are deployed all over the planet, different time zones, virtual work. How do we keep people in sync and working together? Now we're trying to get them back into the office and so on. I also work with much smaller companies because my sweet spot and my common denominator, Hakeem, is to help those founders and business leaders innovate and redefine the way we do something in a specific market category. So I call this changing the narrative, if you will. That's my way to define it, because that's how I view the world. So I work with people in cybersecurity, in the food industry, in cosmetics industry. What really, the way I position my business is I look for founders who have this mentality of, who understand that if they want to disrupt the market, if they want to innovate, if they want to have more impact, they've got to have a different way to bring people together around a collective mission. And you don't do that the traditional, oh, let's have a mission and vision statement and all that. You don't do it. You can't do it anymore like this. You can't do it anymore like this these days. I think that storytelling has brought I think of the ways you can align the team in the stack. You've got your emails and your reports and your meetings and your KPIs and OKRs and advertising and marketing. You got all bunch of stuff, if you're a business leader, like you can try to activate to get people on the same page. And then in the past 10 to 15 years, we keep hearing about storytelling. So storytelling is like the newest thing still. It's still new, but most people don't know what in business. We're not storytellers like in the movie industry, or we're not writers. We're business people, right? And so it's put on the stack. And I see that at least it was my experience, is that it's completely misunderstood. It's misinterpreted. It's misused. And you end up in companies with hundreds of stories that point to hundreds of different directions. So it's not helping. It's not helping. Over the past about 10 years, I came up with this methodology that I call a strategic narrative. And what this does is that it refocuses everyone around a particular viewpoint, a particular conviction around how we do something. So for instance, one of my clients here in Seattle is called Nuos, and they have this very different way to set up operational technology networks. They separate them from the corporate network, so it's a technical company, and their point of view is so radical that they are able to guarantee much higher level of security to their clients, access from a distance, and they're starting to, people are really paying attention. It's a small company, but people are really paying attention to them as redefining what it means to operate IT infrastructure in the retail industry. So that's what I mean by redefining a narrative, is really redefining how you work on something. And if you look around, most very successful, highly valued companies, that's what they've done. That's what they've done. If you think about the Netflix, the Teslas, the Apple, here we have a company in the United States, really fast growing, called Mod Pizza. They were actually started by people who had a business in the UK years ago called Seattle Coffee. And
yes,
Seattle Coffee. Okay, so
yeah.
For instance, they moved back to the States, and they started Mod Pizza, and Mod Pizza is over 500 stores these days. It's a movement. These companies don't operate the same way. They start by thinking about a new narrative first, and then they build everything around it. The traditional way, that to me is dead, it's broken, to think about storytelling is you have a company, it's kind of messy and kind of clunky, and it does what it can. And then you're thinking, hey, let's come up with a story around it, and let's make it sound good. Okay. No, don't do that. This broken, people find out about it. You're not going to attract the right talent. You're going to spend way more money. This is, adding another layer of marketing that's just make things more chaotic. So the pattern that go ahead.
I was just going to say, so is that, because just that bit about the narrative, and starting with the narrative rather than starting with the products, the services, etc. Is that similar to Simon Sinek's why, in terms of having a clear idea on what's your core before you start talking about your how and your what?
It is absolutely tied to Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek was a great influence when he released his book. I would say that conceptually, I can only agree with that philosophy. I go into much further details into how you apply it.
Yes.
How you do it, day to day. If you read Simon's very inspirational. We all thank him for that. I work in the trenches, and so when I brought, all my clients know him, and everybody's like, yeah, start with why, and then the next minute nobody starts with why.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so that's the gap I'm trying to fix right there. Simon Sinek is not the only influence. I have many influences, and I'm really in the practical trenches in making this work. And I have to say that I've come up with pretty interesting success stories these past years. I'm not done. I've not figured everything out, but this is what I'm here for. This is what
and we're going to get into a few of those success stories, I hope, and the process cool. that you just outlined there in terms of the strategic narrative, which I really like.
It's really that word. Yeah.
So obviously, well, not obviously, but one of the things that we said that we'll talk about today was the one thing that you need to innovate and create an impact, and you've already started discussing that because you've linked it to the narrative. So I suppose the question, because lots of people will talk about stories, you said you're stacking it up, and lots of people talk about narrative. So how would you define the difference between a story and a narrative, just so that people are very clear about what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. First of all, if you look in the dictionary, if you look online, if you go to an online dictionary, you will come across almost the same definition between story and narrative, depending on the source. It's basically a series of facts and events. I'm just shortening it. Mm-hmm. And then if you dig deeper in the meaning of narrative, you find out that a narrative brings in a viewpoint. It's an interpretation. It's a redefinition. It's redefining something. So what this gets us into is that a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's the traditional Joseph Campbell story arc of the hero's journey, of the hero on a journey. Start, there's a problem, gets stuck into the rut and finds the solution, and finally almost dies, but finally gets lucky or uses a superpower and realizes something. It's an arc, and it's a model that has been very successful with Hollywood, with movies, and we all recognize this movie. What a narrative is that it has a beginning, a middle, but it doesn't have an end. If you think about all political movements, social movements, religious institutions, large corporations, very, very big, business movements, there is always a beginning for them. There is a middle. They're very active, but it almost like never ends. I don't know if you noticed that, because we don't know what the story is going to be. And that's how they leave it open-ended. And that's how they're able to attract better talents, that they're able to be more agile when the market is disrupted or changes. And that's how they turn people from audience into participants. And the traditional marketing, construct is you have an audience. So audience means people are listening and just being quiet.
Yeah.
Right? At some point, they want to participate. How do you include them? How do you turn them into, how do you mobilize them? That's the real question. That's what a narrative does. So, here we've had, in the United States, a surge of new narratives, very huge, important, big ones that are disrupting so many of our social assumptions in the past 2 years. I'm not going to quote them. I'm just kind of alluding to them, but they're about social justice, about health, about political movements. You name it. And so if you step back and look at this and look how these work, and see how people are really engaging with them, mobilizing with them, and you take these phenomenon and apply them to a business, you start seeing opportunities to completely rethink the way we do business, much more efficiently, much more powerfully, and much more successfully. So that's what I'm inviting people to really reflect upon, and that's what I'm inviting people to really start, working on, rebuilding the way we do businesses here.
And the statement that you've, I know you've said it, and I don't know whether it's ascribed to you originally, but you said that people will pay for a story, but they'll die for a narrative. And I think that encapsulates what you've just been saying in terms of, you can have a story and it'll get you to a certain place, but when you want people to be participants, people really capture them and keep them with you on that journey and attract more people. It's a narrative that you need rather than a story, which doesn't have an end, because people like to go on a journey, don't they? People always like to go on a journey. Even if it's a fairground, the thing you hate about the fairground is that the ride ends. If there's a limited point to it. So on that basis then, because obviously the people listening to this are business people, and I can see some of them thinking, oh, that's all very nice, but where do you start? How do I get a narrative? I've already got the business, so I can't start with the narrative. So where do I start now then from where I am?
Well, if you let's keep a concrete case. I'm working with hopefully that applies to our audience here.
Yes.
I have a client in France. He's about, I might be a little off, but he's rounded up 10, 15 years in his business, right? He has a consulting company. The company is called Kestio. You can look them up. And they specialize into, actually, it's the sales, training, and coaching organization, right? And so he started as a regular consulting company selling projects and hours. And then at some point decided that the way he was operating was not aligned with the impact he was trying to have on his clients. So started thinking about, how do I do this? And he realized that basically the way you deliver consulting is kind of not really helpful for clients. We think of consulting and training as kind of those events and those blocks of time.
Yes.
And he's like, no, our clients need more our expertise spread out through a longer period of time at their convenience. The model should not be centered around us. The model should be a lot more customer centric. And so he put that in place. And at some point he was capped in his growth because the way he was explaining out there what he was trying to do was not matching the way he was operating. So that's where he brought me on. And the first thing I did was have him tell me about why he started the company in the first place. That's one of the first exercises that everyone here listening should start digging into is what I call the origin story. And an origin story is not just to explain on your website, hey, my name is Hakeem. I've got so many hours or years of consulting, and look at how great I am and all that. No, the exercise of the origin story is to dig out the DNA of your business.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And the DNA of your business is really those elements of the culture and why you started the business in the first place that you probably don't even remember, because so many things happen and you get carried away and you're super busy every day and you've got projects and products and employees and opening a store and all that. All of that is kind of unconscious. So the first thing to do is to bring it back to conscious. Why did you start this business in the first place? Look for things like events. Was there a particular day, time, moment? What happened then? How did you feel? Like I told you my origin story. When I was in this meeting room and I was in front of a stock project and I decided to take a risk and have people draw there and I didn't know what was going to happen. Those are the defining moments that really highlight how you react to a certain situation. So you need to write this down. You need to write it down and come back to it. And write it down in a way that really surfaces. So it's not a communication exercise yet. It's a reflection exercise. So don't try to make it look pretty. Don't make it a writing exercise like an act of literature.
Yes.
Just write simply with your own words. It can be messy. In fact, my client at Questio, Fabien, he's done this exercise. He still have all his notes in the draft form. And I'm not even trying to have him make it look pretty because he actually uses it everywhere, and I'll get to that in just a second. So I'm trying to be very practical here for folks. Write it down. Look for the emotional reaction you had to a specific problem. I told you about telling you about a company here called Mod Pizza that we have in Seattle. The reason why they got in their journey and so growing so fast is that they were just like everybody. They were looking for a simple, healthy solution to eat something, and they see that there is either a burger joint or a taco place that don't feel very appealing, and also they go to a pizza place where they see employees that look really miserable, and they go, this is not fair, this is not okay, and they decide to do something about it. That's your origin story right there. You need to capture why you wanted to do something about it, right? Once you have that, you need the second phase is to frame the opportunity. Why do you think that what you're fixing may be interesting to other folks? What kind of leg does it have? Is this something that would also make other people excited? For the longest period of time, I thought what I was doing was just for me. But then the more I was talking to other entrepreneurs, they go, I have the same problem. Everybody tells me to tell my story, but I don't know what to tell them. Like I keep different things, I've been trying different things, and I'm trying just to do an investor pitch, and it's really hard. And so I was realizing, oh, I'm not the only one in the same boat. So back to my client Questio, he uses those elements and put it in his pitch deck. He's raising money right now. It's on his website. He's seen a spike in LinkedIn views right now because he just genuinely talks about his company with his narrative now on LinkedIn. And he goes, hey, one of the things that happened to him, I'll try to say the best I can. He was a salesperson, a young guy, and he was also in his 20s, he was a salesperson and also a professional athlete. And he noticed how much coaching and help he was getting on the sports side, like how much support he was getting to be the best, and nothing on the sales side, despite being an employee at a very, I think he was Procter and Gamble or something, like, large sales organizations with all the means and tools in the world. And he had zero support, none. It was just so mechanical that he didn't feel understood. And he's like, this is not okay. We've completely removed the soul and excitement of a craft, selling as a craft. And it's so hard for people. I want to reintroduce that. And that's his narrative right there. Will he manage to change that for the whole planet? Maybe not. But I guarantee you his impact and his company, it's big and thriving because he thinks like that.
And I think that what you just said there, which I was really interested in, because you said when you were talking about the origin story, the DNA of your business, looking for the emotional reaction, so you understand where those emotional reaction points are.
Right.
Why did you want to do something? But then more importantly, I think, why should other people care? What is it about your story and why you wanted to do it that other people will buy into? I think that's a really critical point to take on board.
And if you let me, I just want to add a comment here for both of us, and just to remind ourselves, and for everyone listening here, when you say, "Hey, what's your story?"
Yes.
Just your story. What's your story? Most people assume that it's a story about you. What's your story? No, there is something about you, but it's mostly about the stories that you have for others. And if you're not clear with that, and if you can't organize those many stories into something that is inviting and appealing for others, you don't have a narrative.
Yes.
You have a bunch of stories, and it starts showing on your website. It starts, you go on a website, it's all about us, who we are, what we do, our awards, our accomplishments. It's all about, I call this the brag zone. And when I first meet with clients, they approach me and they say, "Hey, could you take a look at what we've done in terms of marketing and also internally our operations guide and so on, how we run our meetings?" And very quickly, that's the pattern I've seen for 2 decades now. It's all about the company. It's a very self-centric. It's a very company-centric. And I say, guys, you don't realize it. I see it from the outside because I'm coming, I'm getting to know you. It's all about you. So you may not want to do that. I don't think you want to do that, but that's how you come across. I call this a brag zone. It's very big. So, and I have this chart that I show them where I say, this is where you are right now. What about we try to decrease it to maybe 40 to 50%, not 90%. And just that is, just that aha moment. And when I show them how they can do that through very simple, actionable tips, they start to see immediate results in sales, in team engagement, in clarity. People start to see, oh yeah, we exist for others. We exist for a mission. We exist to have an impact. Now we can measure in metrics and terms and signifiers that are not just about us. So you have more distance, and it's just so much more exciting for everyone.
It's not unusual. I think what you're describing is what I've seen in most sales and marketing departments across 25 to 30 years. It's all very, even though they say we're customer centric, what they mean is we have this product and service, and I need to find a way of convincing those customers that they need this service, rather than actually understanding, as you're just defining, what stories do I have? Well, no, number one, what is it that the customer needs, and what is the need of that customer base that you're trying to serve, and what are the stories that I have which will resonate, which is what you're talking about in terms of the emotion, with those people, rather than almost try to force what you have onto a group of people by talking about yourself and what you do brilliantly.
Yeah, and it's everybody does it. I mean, it's not your fault. It's I'm not trying to blame anyone. I think the idea that we're bringing storytelling to a business field creates that kind of, oh, what's that? That's that, storytelling for people who write well, for artists and screenwriters. Like, how do I handle that? We feel a little uncomfortable. Pretty much everybody who I talk to go, I don't want to be a storyteller. I'm being told that I need to be better at storytelling, but it's kind of hard. How do you do that? You have to take classes, read books, and so on. And so it's like it creates that kind of that discomfort. So I never blame it on anyone. I'm just kind of surfacing what's happening, and people go, oh, that's refreshing. You're telling me that the way I should shape my business, do marketing, talk about, organize it, go about growing it, is actually the way I thought about it in the first place. Yeah,
well, interesting. I mean, I would actually argue that everybody's a storyteller. The difference is whether they're telling good or bad stories, or effective stories or ineffective stories.
Yeah. So what I like to, what I found very powerful in this now rediscovered definition of the word narrative is really that idea that you're going to redefine something. So let me take some examples. So in the case of my client, he's redefining what sales consulting mean for him. And that's why he's much more different. So that's how he differentiates in his market. He's not differentiating because he has a better process or better digital tools. Everybody has the same tools today. They're mostly accessible or free or cheap. We can all buy them. But he differentiates because he redefined what his craft is. And that's how he's cutting through the noise. That's how he's hiring the people that believe, back to the Simon Sinek, why.
Yeah.
He's done that. So in creating a new narrative is a redefinition of how you do something versus a story is telling events, in fact. So, but if you look around, we know that we've got a big climate problem. We're looking for ways to lower our impact, hopefully stop it. And so the food industry is very, it's kind of, we know that it creates a lot of CO2 emissions. So a couple of companies that come to mind is Impossible Burgers here in the United States and Beyond Meat.
Yes.
We've really made some amazing innovation improvement into how you make their products just seamless, just really tastes like meat, but it's all vegetable.
Yeah.
So not only it stops CO2 emissions, but it actually helps decrease it. And so what they've done from the get-go, especially Beyond Food, even before the founder bought the license and marketed it, he spent time defining what his company was going to be about. And the definition he gave was, I'm not going to be in the fake meat business. It's not fake meat. It is meat. How do we define meat?
Yeah.
What's our narrative for meat? I'm asking you, Hakeem. How do you define meat?
I mean, I suppose we define meat as the flesh of an animal.
Right, flesh of an animal.
Yeah.
Perfect. And he went old narrative, new narrative. Meat is also vegetable. So it's almost like now you can go to the dictionary and see a new definition. That's how innovators, visionary founders think, like, take something and put your own definition on it. Yeah. Now, it came with, big technical challenges. He worked with several universities and for many years and got funded. And now they've got an amazing product. But from the get-go, the whole company was founded based on this idea. Like, we're going to give a new definition to what meat is. Some people will still push back. And that's how, okay, another tip for you guys. That's how you're onto something, that you have a narrative, is to start seeing people that push back, disagree with you. That's a good sign. Yeah. So don't be intimidated. Keep at it. Bring on extra courage or whatever you do to pump up your confidence here. Because if you start seeing that you're polarizing your audience, it's because they're not an audience anymore. They are participants.
Yeah.
And so you kind of divide them, and you will see people who are going to start seeing what you see, and others who are they're just not ready. They just, they're not believers yet. But the whole idea behind a strategic narrative is to create new believers new way of doing something. So if you have people give you, pushbacks or devil advocates, or good for you, that's what you should be doing. When I talk, and I explain this difference, I've got hardcore storyteller who tell me you're nuts.
But it's interesting.
Okay,
because
fine,
just as you started to talk about that, your mind, and I'm sure the audience is the same, it starts to think of companies, and you think of Apple. You have people who love them, you have people who hate them. Google, same thing. Microsoft, same thing. Tesla, same thing. And you start thinking, that's true. I've never really thought of it like that, but it's true. When people have a really strong narrative, it's like religion, isn't it? When people have a really strong narrative, you have some people who are believers and some people who say, oh no, I don't like anything that they do. So yeah, actually, that's a really good.
Yeah, you name big tech. Everybody knows those three big names. I wanna highlight. I wanna point people towards also much more local companies, probably unknown or very small, and they try to look around. That's the first. So I have a workshop. I have a new cohort of my workshop starting at the end of January. A little plug here. But
that's what you're here for.
but the thing is, that's one of the first thing I teach people to do is I give them new glasses. I give them a new set of glasses. I give them the strategic narrative glasses, and I teach them how to recognize those companies. And always, I get this, Guillaume, the following week, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, but I just did a search. I looked around. This company, that's what they're trying to do. That's what I didn't get why they're so successful. I get it now. That's the same pattern. So it's mostly pattern recognition. So in my workshop, I give ample, and I'm constantly updating a library of those examples. And I actually really like to go look for startups, more mid-sized, small-sized businesses, even independent consultants in my field. People, management consultants, people who write books and things like that, who really have this different tack on how their industry operates. So that's what I help people do in the first hour and a half of my workshop. Literally, is you get that new understanding, so that you can start thinking about how you're going to build that for yourself and build a much more differentiated, aligned, resilient, inspiring business.
Okay, so on that point, in terms of the building of that narrative, understanding difference, understanding patterns and recognition, any activity, and I've had this discussion with several people, any situation where people can perceive it as sales and marketing, they almost put it in a box and say, right, off, great narrative, company narrative, sales and marketing, can you go and write that narrative and then bring it back to us? Would you say that that's the right approach? Is the narrative the job of sales and marketing alone?
Well, no, right there, no.
A leading question.
Yeah, it was a good question, Hakeem. No, big X. Yeah, delegating this to only sales and marketing is it's the predominant way we think about this. And again, it ties back to this idea that, oh yeah, storytelling is for people who are outgoing and extroverts, and they're good presenters, and they write well, and they no. The whole idea is to actually bring people along on the same page. So if you don't start with that from the get-go, you're failing. So now, do you exclude No. Actually, the marketing, and it's a great opportunity if you're a marketing person or a salesperson to say, hey, I've heard about a new technique, a new way to think about this. I'd like to propose that our leadership team takes a look at this and uses this as a chance to really, revive how we work here. So it's something that is really shared. The best scenario is to really have the leadership team, the CEO, the founder, really drive this. And my clients are all super busy people, so you can't have them do all the work. So it's good to have, if you're a little team, kind of get organized and have maybe one person who leads the effort and two other who really kind of tag team. And as you build the narrative, take over some of the phases and the exercises, and really start spreading this. So it's very much a process about co-creation, because this is how the human brain works. It's really how Homo sapiens, we've all worked since the dawn of time. It's, getting around the fire and working together and building a common myth, a common imaginary picture of where we want the company to go. So don't exclude anybody, be inclusive. Number one priority. CEO, founder, however we want to, business owner, leads the effort, accountable. Don't drop your responsibility to do so. And I see that all the time. Marketing is like, we have all the campaigns you want, but our message need to be tighter, like more clear. Or can you help us think about, understand the strategy here? And that's really the gap between strategy and marketing that we're fixing. But if you think about it, for operations, the same.
So just what you said, in terms of elaborating on what you said, I mean, there was a podcast guest I had, Baba, who we were doing customer-centric marketing, and he said, which I think is what you're saying, is that how to describe the chief marketing officer for the business is the CEO. And I suppose that's what you're effectively saying, the chief narrative officer for the business should be the CEO. So if you have a CEO and they're not doing that, because obviously you've done consultancy and I'm sure you've had challenges with CEOs before. How do you get over that, whereby maybe people in other areas of the business see that a narrative is a critical element of the business, but the CEO doesn't get it or isn't supportive of it? Is there techniques or things that you've seen, that advice you could give on how you could work around that?
I think, it's a very personal thing. It's very case by case. So I would not recommend anything that is forceful. That is, it's not cookie cutter. It's a change effort. So the first thing you have to do is open the conversation and be very practical and simple about it, and tie it back to maybe some of the pains that you have. Maybe, it's down to business things like, when you're operating, I don't know, launching a product or operating a certain facet of your business, whether it's, outside facing, internal facing, bring to attention to this person the fact that things could be faster, it could be more, have less tension if we were on the same page. I often use the word being on the same page, rowing in the same direction, collaborating together. So bring it to their attention and see how they react, see how they see that as a value. Always demonstrate the case. Like, I've noticed that we're losing money here because it doesn't feel like we're pointing to the same direction. I have a diagram, and I'd be happy to actually share it. I didn't think about that, but I have a diagram that I've been working on that shows how we are all vectors, in a team, in a company, or even when we're ourselves. We have velocity. We put effort into something in a certain direction, and so you could draw those vectors on a piece of paper and say, "Hey, you see with that case, well, Jean is going this way, and that's how hard she works, and me, Hakeem, I'm going kind of the different way here, because we're not in sync. Like, we need your help to help us understand what's our priority here, so that we're shooting in the same direction." So be very didactic, do a brainstorming session, maybe use, a whiteboard with markers, and show where alignments could really help with company performance. And in the end of the day, it's also about using your time wisely, I would say.
And that diagram you're talking about, is that the movement creator canvas, or is that something else that you do?
That's okay. So I have I call it the strategic narrative canvas.
Okay.
That was an older version. I think I gave you, Hakeem. Sorry about that.
No problem.
No worries. It's called the strategic narrative canvas. So that's the 4 areas I kind of touched on today, around how you build your narrative. No, the diagram that I was just kind of verbally picturing,
yes,
is just simple arrows. You'll find it on my website. if you sign up to my email list, you will see it. It's very, very simple. It's just expressing the fact that we're all vectors in a company.
Excellent. So because we're saying that, because obviously what we were talking about before was about the one thing to make an impact, to get innovation, and I think it's been very clear that what you're saying is it's around the narrative, because
Exactly.
everything flows out the narrative. So, and I think you've given a couple of examples of where it's worked well. It's always useful when you're trying to move ahead to also know what could be potentially the blockers. So where have you seen it not work so well? And then how have you overcome that, or what do you think are the blockers to getting a good narrative?
So many people, when I talk about this topic, get either they go, well, no, that's not for us. And it's possible because they are in a business that is a commodity, and they're not trying to innovate or push the envelope or change or disrupt. And that's fair. And if you're in this kind of business, then maybe you don't need to change the narrative that you're in. It's fine. But if you are in the other category of business where you're truly trying to differentiate, innovate, push things, people get very easily excited about it. And so they associate this exercise to maybe like a one-time event thing. So yeah, we'll go to Guillaume's workshop, we'll nail that, we'll be good to go for a long time. Or we'll do that during our retreat, or I'm going to use the holiday break to think through, do a lot of writing, redefine, plan, strategize, and all that. This is really the first step. You got to think about it as a long-time commitment to get back to it, because a narrative is unconscious almost. We talked about meat earlier.
Yeah.
It's unconsciously we think about the flesh of an animal. So you have to rewire the way you do something. So in your company, one of the number one pitfalls is super excited, and then next month, nothing.
Yeah.
Like, no. So I'd rather see people go step by step and really see this frequency and this a little more modest approach, but more over the long run, because you're gonna start seeing progress. You're gonna start seeing wins, and then you want to take those wins and make sure that they stick, that they replicate. It takes we say it takes 90 days to change habits, to change the way you think and you talk about a company. So that's really a number one pitfall. Another one that I see is people, I've talked about writing earlier, and people seem, Guillaume writes every day on his mailing list. He's a good writer. So people go, hey, I'm a little intimidated. I can't write. And I think most people think of writing as, again, this act of creating perfect words, but rewriting a narrative can be done through just talking. You can just talk to someone. That's how ancient civilizations were creating innovation. And they had very rudimentary to visually document things. Now we've got all that technology that kind of gets in the way. But I think it's, make your life easy, like lower the bar, because that's one of the pitfalls I always see. Like, yeah, I have to have the best sales deck. I have to have the best website and the best documents everywhere. And it can create this mentality of perfectionism, perfectionist mindset.
Yeah.
That's a trap right there. Another one that I always guide people to avoid. You don't have to be that perfect. Like I said, my clients earlier, he's just been drafting things here and there. It's just the process of applying that in your daily, the decisions that you make, the action that you take. It can be very little things, and then you start seeing big changes happen.
I think I watched a video the other day. I can't remember. It was an American politician, an old man, and it was called "Just Do It," and I think it's similar to what you're saying. Yeah. And I don't know whether that came before the Nike slogan, or the Nike slogan came first, and they need to sue it, and they need to sue him for that. But it was interesting because he was just basically saying, and he was talking about that intimidation wall, and he was saying, you just do it, and if it doesn't work, you just do it again. Because I think in this day and age, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, even like this podcast, or when you do like little pieces to camera, people say, I can't do it because I haven't got a studio, I haven't got a microphone, I haven't got this. And what I found actually is that people nowadays often respond to authenticity in terms of, oh, he's obviously just got a camera and he's just doing it to camera, as opposed to, oh, he's paid, you know, thousands of pounds to somebody to get in a studio with all of the lighting, etc. And I think that people actually warm to that more now than all the bells and whistles.
Oh, I love what you're saying, Heike. I think I don't know if you saw that video. It was a couple of years ago, before COVID, of the guy, you know, with his suit and tie. He was interviewed on camera, and then his kids come in the background.
Yes.
You know, the babies and so on. And this was like, at the time, you know, being authentic and having your life around you was just not accepted, right? So now, look, I mean, this is where I live. Okay, it's pretty clean, it's pretty well organized, because that's where I like to live. But that's my house. If my kids show up, they will show up. You know, you can see my notes here. You can see the truth, and that's the mindset you have to be. I'm so glad you're pointing this out, Hakeem. It's exactly the mindset you have to be when you do strategic narrative. You have to be about that authentic yourself and face, you know, really like, where are you? What's the most viscerally exciting thing you can think about your company? Like, that's it. Authenticity is key.
Yeah, no, I think so. It's so. I just wanted you to recap, because I wrote some of them down. I just want to make sure that people get this, and obviously they'll be able to, you know, hook up with you, and I put all the links, etc. But you said, firstly, the difference between a narrative and a story, and the reason why it's so critical to get the right narrative, is because it allows people to connect with you, it allows people to actually mobilize and get participants, as opposed to an audience, which I really like, because that's what I think everybody wants. And then you said that the key steps are understanding what's the DNA of your business, which allows you to get the origin story, write it down practically. So then you're looking for the emotional reaction, and then understanding why did you want to do that something, or change it, or redefine it, and then more importantly, why should other people be interested in those stories? And it's about not your story. That the challenge that we have in business is your story, which is what most people do, versus stories that you have for others. Would that be a good summation of some of the key points? Because I always want to make sure that people take, because you're saying such good stuff, so I want to make sure that people are taking those key pointers away. I think
you sum them up accurately. I think it's a great start. There are many more. I'm not gonna lie. It's a vast topic. It's a strategy. It's a long-term thing. It's not a one-day thing. But as far as how we get started with maximum impact for a limited amount of time, your points are exactly 100% accurate. I'm glad you did this.
And I think from what you've been saying, it's clear to me that you're thinking about business differently, because I don't think, and I'm not saying there isn't anybody, but I don't think there's many people who are explaining the connection between narrative and business growth and strategic direction and alignment and vision the way that you're doing it. Because I've heard lots of people talk about narrative, and that's obviously why I wanted to get you on. I've heard lots of people talk about narrative and story, but there seems to be, when I've heard that before, there's a disconnect between that and how, okay, so that's very interesting, but why do I want that in a business? And I think you've really articulated how it gets you to innovation and to growth.
Well, I'm glad you felt this way, Hakeem, because that's how I felt before starting to really digging into what this represented for me. I mean, you see those books, they're mostly storytelling books, and I read not everything, but I read quite a large quantity of, you know, what an average business person might pick up. And every time I kept, and I practiced, I applied, I tried, you know, and I practiced, and I go, okay, this is first of all, it's all the same. Oh, a story is a beginning, a middle, and an end, and Joseph Campbell, and and it's great, good. But that's not just that. It's not just that. It goes way beyond. And most people, to your point, most people, we all, you know, associate this topic as a marketing and sales. So the shortcut we make is, oh yeah, it's great to hook. It's great to hook people. we're going to be more interesting. We're going to cut through the noise. We're going to just, catch their attention. Well, guess what? You're not the only one. If you're doing software I'll take software as a service because for me, it's kind of the biggest example out there. I don't know if you've seen there is this diagram of all the logos, in the marketing. Yeah. It's like 30,000 different solutions now these days. 10 years ago, it was maybe like 300. It's like times 1,000 now, or 10,000. So if you keep with this mentality, you're just doing what everybody else does. You're just adding to the noise. So, okay, in my framework, this is also part of it. I'm saying it's not enough. It's not enough these days. You've got to have a differentiated point of view, something that really is more visceral. We just went through this. I'm not going to sound like a broken record, but you got the whole point here. I'm really pushing for a new definition of what narrative is for business. It's strategy. It's engaging people. It's really rethinking the way we do business.
No, and I think it's really nicely put, because you said about, the narrative is about redefining what you do, and whether it's what you do, what the industry does. And I think the example you gave about the Beyond Meat, because it's interesting, because when you asked me the question about what do you consider meat to be, and I was thinking, because obviously you think, well, it's the flesh of an animal, but the reason I had to think about it, because it has been redefined. Because now, if you listen to people talk about meat, it's all about protein, and people will say, well, meat isn't the only way to get protein, so why do you have to make a burger out of meat? It's about and they have definitely redefined it. Because if I went back, say 10, 15 years, I'm a big meat eater, and I would have thought I would never ever eat non animal-based meat. And now lots of times when I go to burger places, I actually find the plant-based burger is actually tastier than the meat-based, the animal-based burger. And it is a reconditioning of the mind. It's a reconditioning of the narrative, but it makes a difference, because you do, as you said, you get people who are evangelical about it, and once you've got to that stage, success is guaranteed.
Yes, yeah, you create more believers outside, but internally, what happens then is also, because the picture is so clear, it's so contrasted, that you don't need as much oversight. People know what to do. They have a decision, sometimes it's a small decision. Hey, maybe we change supplier. Which supplier do we take?
Yes.
Well, what does our narrative tell us? Should we even change? Do we even need it? I don't know. See, you start accelerating all of the normal human processes that a business needs to function well. And
well, we've come to the end of our hour, unfortunately, because I say this to most of my guests, because I'm very fortunate to have some great guests on. But it's like I could speak to you for about another 5 hours actually, and we probably even then wouldn't scratch the surface. But I think we've scratched the surface. I think people will now warm to what a narrative is and how that narrative should be used in business. But we're only scratching the surface. So, I mean, how do people get in touch with you? You've obviously talked about your website, the mailing list, which I'll drop all the links into the podcast. And you also mentioned the workshop. So how do people get access to the workshop, and what sort of things would they do on that workshop?
So my workshop has a special page on my website. Everything is in there. You'll find the goal, the curriculum. You'll be able to enjoy a sample video, some testimonials. I run this workshop for a small group of people once a quarter. The next one, depending on when this podcast will be featured, but the next one is start January 25th.
Okay.
It's over 7 weeks, and you get access to a series of videos where all my content is there. It's very didactic, very well explained, structured. You've got some additional resources, and then we meet once a week for 90 minutes with the small group of people. I cap the group at 12 people. because I really want these interactions to be personal. It's more like group coaching, to be honest, than workshop. And then in between those sessions, so this goes through 7 weeks. In between those sessions, you have access to me on Slack, and you have access to the group. So it's a program that gets you a lot of intensity to really nail down this concept and have a first version of your revisited company narrative. Most people. So people come out of this with a practical guide, like a practical, it's the deliverable that they produced. It can be slightly different forms. I don't make it strict. People have slightly different formats, but it all does the same thing we just described during this podcast today. And also, I try to challenge them to make the first set of decisions. So it's also a safe space to test some new ideas and new decisions that you may implement in your business to change the way your business runs.
Okay, so thank you very much for that, Guillaume. And I think that anyone who's listened to this will realize that if you want to redefine your narrative, or you just want to improve your narrative, or you haven't got a narrative, you probably want to jump on or try and at least to apply to get onto the workshop, because as Guillaume said, he's selective, but not selective because he's trying to exclude people, but because he wants to give value to make sure that he can actually give you more of a personal service. So thank you very much, Guillaume. It's been illuminating, it's been very useful, and I'm pretty positive you'll get a lot of people trying to contact you to start working on their narrative. So thank you very much for joining us today.
I'm here to help anytime, Hakeem. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.